Hello, this is Christian Ludemann here. I am today with a fellow Dane. Hello, Lars. How are you?
Hi, Christian. Thank you. I'm very good. How are you?
So, yeah, me and Lars are gonna talk about NX DevOps pipelines and how to set it up, including NX Cloud, distributed computation cache, some security concerns, and distributed task execution. So everything you need to know if you're working with NX, and of course you want to run it on your DevOps pipeline. So Lars, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
I don't want to talk too much about that. Let's get to the interesting stuff soon enough. But yeah, I've been working with Angular enterprise apps and NX enterprise apps for 4, 5, 6 years, I don't know. And I've been heavily involved in the CI/CD part of side of things as well, and architecture. So this is my jam. And of course, NX has a lot of amazing features, but certainly the time you can save spent in CI pipelines and things like that is a huge win. The larger the code base, the better, the bigger savings you can get with NX.
Yeah, nice. It's also been my default now. Almost for every project I use NX now, even projects that are not necessarily monorepo projects. It just gives so many other benefits with the caching and all the good dev tools. So firstly, the one thing we want to look at is let's talk about like what is NX and what is this novel NX thing? Why should you use it? Why does it matter compared to just using plain Angular CLI?
Okay, so there's a lot of topics about that, and actually I'm writing a free book about NX for Angular developers that goes into detail explaining the differences from an Angular perspective, because explaining NX to someone outside of the Angular ecosystem is a different story than explaining it to someone who's familiar with the Angular CLI, because it has the same features as the Angular CLI and then some. So it's all the best parts of the Angular CLI with a cherry on top, or multiple. So
yeah,
how like from a CI perspective, NX is more focused on having a monorepo where you have many projects and maybe many apps, and there's a kind of a philosophy of how to split your applications into many more granular so-called library projects. And it's not a library as in an npm package necessarily. It could be, but it's more about workspace libraries that are encapsulated pieces of code that might be shared or it might not be shared. It might just be a layer of your entire application. So instead of having all the logic in an application project, we will split it up into many smaller projects. And when we do that, we get more benefits from NX. We can spend less time testing, building, linting, all of that, because we can do it on a per project basis.
Yeah, in my own Angular course, I also recommend using NX, and I usually explain the benefits, such as you have the main benefit is the affected commands, which will make you orchestra and monorepo and run the build, test, and lint and end-to-end test in a smart way that is aware of relationships between dependencies, and you can actually trigger the task on the affected code, because you can split it up into smaller projects rather than run it on as a default Angular CLI project. You would run on the whole application. So you can get some more efficient DevOps jobs running by only triggering what is actually affected. So that is these affected commands. We can talk more about them when we get closer to the code, how they work. And then there are also some things with some built-in linting rules that with module boundaries. But it's also nice to orchestra when you have a scaled up project. Let's say you have 50 developers working on a banking project, maybe in many different feature teams. Then it's nice to make rules for who can talk to who. So it's not just one big spaghetti and everyone is creating direct couplings to everybody, but maybe you have some rules like who can talk to you can only talk to the shared code. Otherwise, you should not be able to like know about other feature teams' code. So you can create stuff that actually scales with automation that way. So yeah, and then there's all other stuff. They have some, for example, pessimistic, optimistic update tooling, and they have other tooling that is nice, and they support a lot of other front-end frameworks rather than just Angular now. They support React, for example, Next, and a lot of other stuff that is following this like universal format. That's kind of inspired of Angular CLI, but you can use it for other applications. So it's really good if you have a mix of different technologies. You can have that in one repo now. So yeah, I think that's a brief intro about NX and why it can be beneficial for apps, and not just Angular apps, but for all kinds of front-end frameworks now.
And from a DevOps perspective, there's kind of three concepts that are important. There's the concept of a smart task, for example, smart or intelligent testing, smart or intelligent building and linting. And that was what you were talking about, that the change we make in a pull request, the amount of testing and linting should be the same size as the amount of code you're changing. We shouldn't need to run every test in a big code base just from changing one file. The other concepts are distributed caching, which is something offered by the NX CLI. And then we have distributed task execution, which requires NX Cloud, which can save us even more time in CI runs and jobs.
Yes. Yeah, we can look into how we can look at some code, how it actually would look like to configure a CI workflow with NX.
Sure.
Can you share something, Lars?
Yeah, I can do that. If we're ready, let's find it here. Okay, are you able to see my screen now?
I can see your screen.
Code editor.
Yeah, yes, and it's nicely zoomed in.
Great. So this is an NX Angular workspace. There shouldn't be much going on in it. For the purpose of this demonstration, there will be others in this episode, but for purpose of this demonstration, the code doesn't really matter. Let's focus on building a workflow. I'll be using GitHub workflows. So first off, I'll create a .github folder. Then inside of here, we'll have another folder called workflows. And then we'll make one called ci.yml. It's a YAML syntax. And we give it a name. Let's just call it CI. We give it, it's usually good to give it some node options to increment the size here to 6 GB of RAM if you're using the GitHub hosted runners in the normal tier. Recently, GitHub has introduced large runners where we can get up towards 32 cores and 64 GB of RAM. So if you have more RAM, you should allocate more RAM to Node, of course. Anyways, you should always set this setting for CI workflows when using Node. Okay, so in GitHub, the way we set up our triggers is we have events, and one of the events is push. We can set a push to main. That will be our merge run. After we merge a pull request, this workflow will be triggered. But we will also use the same workflow, the same pipeline. It's called workflows in GitHub, but some call it pipelines for pull requests. So this workflow will be triggered both for the merge run, but also for the pull request commit. So with that out of the way, let's we could also, let's go to the jobs now. So here we can create one or more jobs, and GitHub Copilot is suggesting something here. It's not all bad. I could take this and expand upon it. So this would be doing, there's some code coverage here in the end. I'll remove that. But this is actually not too bad. I mean, I would like to use the newest GitHub Actions here, the newest version of Node supported by Angular. But then, running npm install, running a build script, a test script lint, and maybe let's say an end-to-end. This would be running everything in one job And of course, we should make sure that these npm scripts would point to the correct nx command. But this could be one starting point.
And by the way, for people watching that are maybe using another DevOps tool like GitHub Actions, it shouldn't matter too much if you're using one thing or another.
Right.
It should be pretty much same syntax, and it's mostly NX these commands that are doing the heavy lifting. So migration would be small differences if you're using Azure DevOps, for example, or Circle CI and other other CI providers.
Yeah, for sure. There is like the important bits here are the NX commands that we will look into now. There's also some integrations if you're using the NX cloud, and we'll get back to that later in this episode. Anyways, this is not half bad. Actually, this would work if we wouldn't be parallelizing anything, because we would only have one job. But let's use this as a starting point. So I will open my package.json here, and then I'll make sure we have there's a build, there's a test. Let's see if they are right now. And nx build, that would run the build command for one project. But if I have many projects, I need to run all of them. So the command for that will be nx run many, and a parameter called target with build. And GitHub Copilot knows about nx, so it suggests that I add these parameters as well, all and parallel. And that would be correct. So this would be my build command. So that's what would be triggered here in line 21 npm run build. So let's make sure we have one for test as well. And it's just about the same. nx run many target test for all projects, and using parallelization of the commands. So the target is, if you're familiar with Angular CLI, NX has the same, a similar configuration. There's some different ways to configure your workspace, but it also supports an Angular something similar to Angular. In fact, there's an Angular JSON in this project, but instead of having the configuration objects per project here in this one Angular JSON file, instead it maps to a directory. So I would have to open up my directory, for example, this Angular app project, and look for a project JSON file. Inside of here is where it will look pretty similar to an Angular CLI configuration, but just for one project. So here we see that it has targets. In Angular CLI, this would be called the architect property. And we see that we have a build target. And instead of a builder, it will have an executor. But other than that, it's pretty much the same as you would know from Angular CLI. So we have a build target. Let's make sure we also have a test target in this project. Here it is, and it's using Narwhal's jest runner or executor for the test target. So that's what we will be triggering using the nx run many command, but it'll do it no matter how many projects we have in this NX workspace. Does that make sense, Christian?
Yeah, definitely. It's like a good starting point. It's going to give you basically the same build performance. Actually, it's going to be slightly worse because you're going to do more separate builds than just doing it all in one. But yeah, it's going to be similar to the one you get out of the box with Angular CLI. But yeah, this is before we start doing any smart configuration.
Yeah. So next one is lint, and it's basically the same. But we use nx run many target lint, and the last one was end-to-end. Let's use that as well, but let's not run that in parallel. End-to-end tests don't run too well in parallel on CR runners with limited resources. So now we have build, test, lint, and end-to-end scripts. So my bet is that this workflow would run. I don't want us to spend time seeing it actually run in GitHub. And I don't have this one in particular published to a GitHub repo, but this is basically, this is what we're looking for the very first simple starting point. A logical next step would be to split it into multiple jobs. I mean, this is called the build job. It should only be doing the build. So we might have a similar one called test, right, for the unit test. And we would comment out these other targets. So now we're running the build tasks for all the projects and the unit test targets for all the projects in parallel in two different GitHub runners. So now instead of time being built, then test, then lint, then end to end, it'll be done at the same time in GitHub. So let's also do one for lint and see if GitHub Copilot is able to do that for us, and it was. So now we have that down. Let's do the final one for end-to-end tests. Here we go. Looks good. Thank you for that, GitHub Copilot. So now we have split it up into 4 different jobs. So now we have made the time go almost a quarter of having everything in one job. I mean, depending on how much time it takes for these tasks to complete, of course.
Nice.
So that's what I would call a basic NX CI workflow. We're just running all the tasks for all the projects, but we're splitting it into a few jobs to save a little time. This is not much different from what we could get from most other. We didn't have to use NX for this, except for that NX command to run all the targets for all the projects. I mean, that will be a bit more difficult to do with the Angular CLI, but I have built a Node.js script to do something similar in Angular CLI project. So of course it's doable, and you can do it with other programming languages. Like if you're using .NET, you can do something similar. So it's not that NX specific, but this is how you can do it just to get up and running in an NX project. I mean, we did this in a few minutes, and GitHub Copilot generated most of the code. So this should get us up and running fast. So I think that's it for the first topic. Christian, what's the next one?
So the next one is we're going to try to optimize this. So we start using these affected commands to trigger the different CI tasks only on the affected projects.
Yeah. And for this, I think I have a project here. It's an open source web app I've built with Angular and NX. It doesn't have a lot of projects, but it has a few, and it has a workflow that's taking advantage of the NX affected commands. It's pretty much similar to the one we just saw. I mean, there's a concurrency strategy here, which is something specific to GitHub. We don't have to talk about that right now. There's some permissions security-wise to prevent GitHub CI runners from having access to changing things in your GitHub organizations. But here we come to the build job, right? Similar to what we saw before. But now, because we want to use these NX affected commands, we have to add a parameter here to, sorry. Is it zoomed enough? Can you see it?
Yeah, I think it's readable. Yeah.
I mean, I can zoom in one more time. That should do it. So when we're checking out the code, this is like git pull into the CI runner. GitHub is only fetching the latest commit by default. So when we set the git fetch depth to 0, we will get all the branches, all the commits checked out into this GitHub runner. And as the comment says here, that is required by this GitHub action by narwhal called nx set shias. And that's the next one being run here. We don't have to specify any parameters. And what it does is it calculates some computations that are necessary for the NX affected commands to work in a CI runner. So it will calculate the latest commit if it's in an active branch with a PR, a pull request in it, or if it's a run on the main branch after a merge, it would calculate the latest successful build in this workflow and compare it to the current commit that has just triggered this workflow again. And based on that, either when you're in the pull request branch, it'll compare it to the main branch, and it will run only the targets that have been affected by the changes in your pull request branch. Or if it's in the merge run, it will run all the targets for the projects affected by your changes since the last successful run. So it's trying to do as little as possible if we're using the nx affected commands. So let's see if we're actually doing that here. So down here, we see that we have if statements. The first one says, if this is a pull request, then we run the yarn affected build command. So we'll have to go look at the script for that in package.json. And if it's a merge commit, we will run the yarn build script. So there's two pathways here. If you're on the merge run, you will do yarn build. If you're on a PR, you'll do yarn affected build. So let's go look at those scripts. And then we'll discuss a decision I also made here once we understand that decision. So looking into package.json here, the first one was affected build. And this one runs the nx affected :build with the production configuration. So it runs the build targets with the production configuration for all projects that have been affected by the change when comparing a pull request branch to the main branch. And in fact, I could also have used this command for the merge run, and in that case, it would compare to the latest successful build. But the decision I made in this case was I always want to run build for all the projects on a merge, just to make sure that everything still builds, not just the affected projects. This is just running a tight ship if you really, really want to make sure, because there could be some things that could lead to like differences between what's in the pull request and how does everything look once it's merged into the main branch. So I mean, this would be the most time-saving one, just running the affected build command. That was nx affected build. But if you want to make absolutely sure that every project in this code base, this monorepo can build, we would use the build script, which should be what we saw before. Oh, actually, not in this case because there's only one application, but that would be the nx run many target build that we saw before in the simple workflow.
Yeah, it's probably not a problem for most projects that if you're doing a full build of all apps on the master on the main branch, because that shouldn't happen too many times. Maybe like how many times a day is the main branch updated, right?
Yeah, so this would be a good default. I mean, we could have, instead of having these two if statements, we could just run nx affected build every time. That would work both on the main branch and in the pull request branch and make the workflow slightly simpler. And so this is the template for, like, this is the structure of the build job, and we will see exactly the same thing in the lint job, that we check out the source code with all branches, all commits, so that it can compare to the main branch or to the history of this branch. Then we run the special narwhal action for GitHub called the narwhal nx set shots. And you would need something like this if you're not using GitHub. I think there's a circle CI org for something like this, and you said there was a script for computing it in any environment. Is that correct? You saw a script for doing this?
Yeah, that's a script on the NX website.
Okay. So, and here this is a custom GitHub action. It runs the setup node action and yarn install or something like that. So that's the same as we saw in the basic workflow, except it's reusing it across all these jobs. So I don't have to copy paste everything, and I only have to change it in one place if I want to make a change to the setup. Okay, so down here, well, this is the lint job. So there's one special command here by NX called NX workspace lint. that goes and makes sure our configurations are as expected, that the workspace configurations and the project JSON files are set up correct, and that every source code file in this workspace, this monorepo, is part of an NX project. If that's not the case, it will generate a warning. So this is a special command, NX workspace lint. Doesn't take a lot of time to run. But after that, it's the same as before, yarn affected lint, which behind the scenes is NX affected lint. And then I like to add the max warnings 0 parameter, because that would do so that lint warnings will break the build. So they will be treated as errors. I don't see a point in raising warnings if no one's checking the logs. So instead of having to configure every lint preset to trigger errors instead of warnings, you can just add this parameter, and every warning will be considered an error breaking your CI build. So that's another decision I have made. You don't have to do that. It's just my preference. And of course, there's the same script for end-to-end tasks and unit test tasks. And we have a job for test. We have a job for end-to-end. So this was the next step. That is making good use of this NX affected command. And maybe I could even open up this repo, but I'm not sure I have it checked out locally, and it might take some time to do yarn install. But let me check if I have it available.
Sure.
Because then we could see the NX project graph, just to see how many projects are in this one. I don't have node modules, so that would take a few minutes. It will also bring down my connection, so I can't share my screen or talk to you. So let's do that some other times. Anyways, that was to show that maybe we can see it in the NX documentation, how a graph, how it looks like. Yeah, the command is NX graph. It will build like an interactive application showing all your projects and their tags and their dependencies. And you can also do the affected graph, where it shows you which projects are affected by the changes in your current branch. So that is very helpful. And I'm seeing if there's an example here. That doesn't seem to be the case. Maybe here in the tutorial, explore the graph could be it. Yeah, here's an example. It might not be the latest UI, but it looks something like this, where we can see all the projects in our NX workspace. We can click it, and there's like grouping and filtering and stuff like that. It's very helpful to explore a workspace, and it can give you a visual representation of the changes in your branch, and that can make you kind of think about this change. Was that supposed to affect that other app, or because then there might be some file that I didn't really expect to affect the other application, right? So that's something the NX tooling can help you do as well. So unless you have some questions, Christian, that's all I wanted to show for this topic.
Yeah, it's a pretty good setup from introducing the affected commands. If you wanted to get rid of the conditionals inside of the different tasks, I've seen on the NX side they have the example for the DevOps setup where they group all these is pull request or is merge. They do that in the top of the configuration. So you set these environment variables in the top, and then it just runs basically affected commands all the way. So it simplifies, but it also has some more complexity than at the configuration at the top. So I kind of like this. It's pretty simple, and we just run for all the projects whenever it's on the main branch. So yeah, that should work pretty good.
Yeah. What's the next topic?
So the next thing is distributed computation cache using NX Cloud.
Using NX Cloud. Okay. For this, I need an NX repository with node modules installed. So I'll just take this very basic one. And here, let's try running one of those commands. Did I set them up in the script? Yeah. So let's try doing the test, testing all the projects. So that would be NX, run many, target test, all, and maybe parallel. Looks like there's only 2 projects in this workspace, but it would work the same way for no matter how many projects you have. And they're done. Okay, so say I close down my computer and I come back tomorrow and I run, let's see, now it's tomorrow and I want to run tests again. Boom. I got the result back immediately. NX calculated that I didn't have to run the test again because nothing has changed in this code base. Maybe I just wanted to go into a feature branch we're working on and see if there's any changes from another developer since I last opened it up. But that doesn't seem to be the case. And NX is stating here, I don't know if you can read it, but it says existing outputs matched the cache, so it's left as is. So it'll bring you back the output. The result of running these tests is everything's successful. It could also have been everything's broken, but then you would need to run the test again. So this is using a local cache, a local, it's not distributed, but it's using a local cache. This is something you can do with or without NX Cloud. Let's see if this repo is using NX Cloud. I'll open up NX.json and I'll look for the task runner options. And in fact, this one is using the default task runner. The default task runner is the local cache. And it has an option here saying the cacheable operations. So that the tasks or the targets is build, lint, test, and end-to-end. These are the targets, the tasks that can be cached by NX. But it's only doing it locally. There's also the option to do it distributed. That means I could share the same cache with you, Christian, on your computer and with the CI runner running in GitHub or whatever. There's a different package for that. If you're using VS Code with an NX console extension, it'll also ask you sometimes, do you want to enable NX Cloud? And there's also a generator command for adding it. I just don't remember it right now. But if you're creating a new NX workspace, it'll also ask you, do you want to install the NX Cloud? In fact, it's on by default. I just usually don't do it for just sandbox projects like this, but for every other project, there's no reason not to use it. I mean, NX, I think they have now 5,000 hours monthly of saved computation time for every project. And for open source projects, you can apply for a cloud or an open source license, and you can get unlimited saved computation time through NX Cloud. So there's not really any reason not to add it. It's just that this is a sandbox project. So the difference when using NX is it will store the cache in the NX Cloud, and it'll bring it down to your computer if I have run the same tasks before. So now the question is, Christian, what would cause me to have to run these tests again? Well, I would need to change some source code or a test. But let's change just one file here in the app component. The title is now Angular application. Let's see if what happens when I try to run the same command now. So now NX has calculated that there's one project that needs to run now. That's the Angular app project. The other one was retrieved from cache, the other application project, because it didn't have any files changed and it didn't depend on any projects with changed files. So now it's telling me one test failed. So there's probably a test I should consider updating if this change is intentionally. But also I didn't have to run all the tests from the other project, only this one project, because that's where the change was, and there's no dependencies to this project.
Yeah, so you probably see it's how it can be a huge optimization to the whole, like both the developers waiting time when they do builds and they do test and editing, because basically you're only gonna run a task on a certain snapshot of the code once. Because as soon as you do it when it's distributed, you're gonna have some token in the project where it's gonna be linked to that token. So everybody that's working with the same NX workspace, they're gonna be hooked in to that distributed cache.
Yeah, right. And it's not only the console output that's cached, it's also when you're doing a build, it's also configured to cache the build output, the bundles. It could also be configured to cache the test coverage reports, which is something that takes time to generate as well. So it's both the console output and the files. Let's say the files here in the dist folder. These are also cached so that I delete this dist folder now. Now it's gone. And now it's tomorrow, or it's you on your computer and you run the same run many build. Let's see what happens. So immediately it returned they built successfully with the production configuration. And we see that the files are back in my folder. And if I was using NX Cloud, this would happen through NX Cloud. So it could be transferred to you. But I'm just using the local cache here. So there's a cache folder for NX somewhere on my computer that saved these files.
Yeah, so all of this is pretty good. For most projects, when I tried to introduce this, there have been some security concerns, and usually it needs a security approval, especially for like security critical applications like a banking app. It has caused some security concerns. How's NX Cloud secured against attacks, and if somebody injects stuff inside of the cache and now it's going to be maybe deployed on the server and such?
Yeah, so there's at least two things to discuss here, and one of them is if it's sending like my production build to the cloud, would someone else be able to get it? Or definitely for sure it's stored in an American cloud or whatever. So what can I do about that if I don't like having my stuff stored in a US cloud provider? So first thing is we can encrypt it. There's a setting to encrypt it both when it's transferred and in the cloud, so that it's only decrypted once it gets back to my machine or your machine, Christian, the ones that have the NX Cloud key. And the other thing is there's a thing called NX Cloud Enterprise, I think, where you can run it on premise. So it's you decide where the distributed cache, the NX Cloud instance, is running and stored. So that would take care of some of these concerns. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
And the other important thing is something I don't think a lot of people realize is when you have an open source project and you use NX, by default, NX generates and let's see if I have NX Cloud in this repository, for example. When you generate a new NX workspace and you enable NX Cloud, yeah, here it's enabled. So you see there's an access token, and that is so anyone with this key can read from the cache. But more importantly, this is actually a read-write key. So anyone with this access token can write to the cache and read from the cache in NX Cloud. And that's a problem when you have an open source project. Now anyone can write to the cache and inject malicious code if they know how to work with the NX Cloud APIs. So if you have an open source project, or at least in a public repo, first thing you should do is go to the NX Cloud, log in. It's on nx.app, or now it's actually on cloud.nx.app. Open, you should, there's a link when you run NX CLI to claim your NX Cloud organization. And I've done that here for an unimportant project. So like I shared you the other, like you just saw my access token, now you can read and write. Same thing here, I'm going to show you the access token because this is not an important project. But so this is the NX Cloud. This is not a project I've been running recently, but let's go here into manage access tokens. Because now we see that there's only one access token here. That's the default one generated by NX, put into the NX Cloud, where I have 5,000 hours per month saved in computation time. But it's a read-write key. So if this is a public repository like the one we just saw, anyone has access to, first of all, read, but more importantly, to write to the NX Cloud cache. So what we would need to do here is delete this one since it's already exposed on the public web. We don't want that. We should create a new one. And let's make it a read only. So now the token is here, and I should instead put this into my public repo in the NX JSON config, because then people can only read the output of the NX cache, but it's an open source project, so that's not really an issue. But at least now they cannot write to the cache. But that presents another problem is whatever is cached by my local machine cannot be written to the NX Cloud. So my preference is I generate another read-write key, the only read-write key, and I put it in GitHub secrets. So my CI runner will have the read-write key, because then the most developers can make use of whatever has run in the CI runner. But you cannot get my cache from my machine. We'll have to wait for it to be run in the CI runner. So this is my preferred solution for an open source project. There's other strategies, and it's all lined out here on the NX documentation. If you search for security scenarios, this is one of the decisions you can make, and there's a few strategies here for, and this is one of them, sharing the read key, but having a private write key and putting it on trusted computers or such as CI runners only. So this is actually a huge security issue for open source projects using NX. If you're using the default key and it's checked into the source code, which it is by default, it's a read-write key. Anyone could inject malicious packages into your NX Cloud. So for example, if you have a workflow that goes and deploys automatically to NPM, but it pulls the build from the NX Cloud cache, someone can inject malicious code into that NX Cloud cache if you have the default read-write token. So go out, if you have an open source project, go out there, see if you have a read-write key and it's checked into your source code, you have a problem.
I bet there's a lot of open source projects that actually had the read-write key exposed in the, in the GitHub repository.
Yep. So yeah, maybe GitHub should add a code scanning feature for this. Problem is you cannot see on the key itself if it's a read-write or read token. You can only see that inside of NX Cloud. So you cannot really scan for it in that way. You have to check inside of the NX Cloud app here.
Yeah, that's a nice tip. And also another feature of NX on the CI workflow is the distributed task execution. Mm-hmm. You can do with NX Cloud. Okay.
So this is a really useful feature. And for this, you need some, you cannot do this without NX Cloud. So you need NX Cloud. What it gives you is even more automation or intelligence in how your build and the other tasks are managed. Because instead of having a job for build, a job for test, a job for lint, and a job for end-to-end tests, Instead, it will, as we'll see in a minute, it'll say, I have this many GitHub runners or whatever your CI/CD provider is. I have this many agents available. Give them some work to do. And then there will be one CI runner that will calculate all the jobs you need to run, all the tasks. So I have this many end-to-end tasks. I have this many build tasks, this many lint tasks, and this many unit test tasks. And then it'll submit it to NX Cloud. NX Cloud will get back to the coordinator, and it will start sending commands out to the worker agents that are listening for commands. And then it'll say, okay, you go do the end-to-end build task for this project, you go do the end-to-end task for this app, and then and you do the lint tasks for these 4 projects, and you do the lint task for these 2 projects, and the build task for these 2 other projects. And once they're done, they will go report back and say, I'm idle. Do you have more tasks for me to do? And the coordinator will say, yeah, well, we still need to run end-to-end tasks for this app. Okay, well, let me do that and get back to you. So in this way, that the workload is balanced through however many workers you have, because end-to-end test might take a long time. So maybe one worker is busy just end-to-end testing one project, but lint tasks are fast, and maybe the end-to-end, the unit test tasks are fast. So they will continuously finish some tasks and they say, give me some more to do. And it's not that all unit tests are run on just one machine or one job. No, it'll be distributed or balanced throughout all these worker agents. So what do you think of that concept, Christian?
Yeah, it definitely will speed up some bottlenecks in the whole workflow, so you can make sure to use the agents as efficiently as possible, and not like wait for one of them being idle, but instead, orchestra when one is idle.
Yeah, so maybe you're thinking this sounds good, but how difficult is it to set this up? And there's some good news here. If we open back up this NX workspace I have, then I'm using the NX console extension here in VS Code, and available for WebStorm as well, and in a third-party plugin. Let's go look for the CI workflow generator. So if I want to run this CI workflow generator by Narwhal, I can give the workflow a name. CI sounds good, and then I can select a provider. So they will generate a workflow for either GitHub Actions, Circle CI, or Azure DevOps. So if I generate one for GitHub, let's see how that would look. Or maybe I already had I think I already have the CI workflow in this repo.
So it's the workspace not connected to the NX Cloud.
Okay, not connected to NX Cloud. Okay. And I don't remember I don't think, is there a generator for this cloud? No.
So NX Cloud. Yeah, but I always done it from scratch. That's a CLI command.
NX connect to
NX Cloud
would be my guess.
It is.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, so you can always do this, and they'll set up the read-write token and configure your NX JSON, and now you have 5,000 hours saved computation time per month. Of course, now we need to think about the read-write tokens and the other security issues we just discussed. But yeah, it should go by. It's not done yet. Here we go. Yeah, now it's up in NX Cloud, and let's see what it changed. It changed the NX JSON, added an access token, and changed the runner to the NX Cloud task runner. So now this is my read-write token, and it's connected to the NX Cloud. So let's see now if I can add, let's call it DTE instead. So now let's try to generate a distributed task execution workflow for GitHub Actions, because that's what we've been looking at so far. Let's run this generator. So that if you were to do this manually, you can copy paste the command here and see what it looks like in the terminal. So it would be, well, this one says ng, but nx generate. We don't have to have this packaging. It could just be nx generate CI workflow, then the name and the parameter called CI set to GitHub in my case, but it could also be Circle CI or Azure. It's done generating, so let's go look at whatever it generated for us and compare it to what we have seen earlier. So we have the same triggers on push to main, pull request, and we have only 2 jobs. This is everything in this workflow. There's a main job, that's the NX coordinator, and there's agents. This is the NX Cloud agents that will say, give me some work to do, and it'll go do it. And then I'm done, give me some more work to do. In this case, we can specify how many agents we want, and it'll configure it in GitHub. So I think we could easily do 8 actually. I mean, that would use all the runners just for one workflow run. But if we're only a few developers, that might be what we want, because we want to utilize however many runners we have in GitHub. So yeah, this is where we can tweak it. But yeah, 8 that could be done. So there's 8 agents and 1 coordinator. So we're using here what's called a reusable workflow in GitHub Actions. So it's pointing to Narwhal's GitHub repository, or the Narwhal organization on GitHub, and it has a repository called CI. Inside of that repository is a .github folder, and it has a subfolder called workflows. And then we have an NX Cloud main YAML file, which is the reusable workflow, and its version to 0.6. And then we specify some parameters here, the number of agents to expect, some init commands, and one of the init commands is NX Cloud start CI run, stop agents after build, and agent count is, I have to set this one to 8 as well. And down here, it's, okay, we'll get to that. Okay, so this is something that connects to NX Cloud. And it says to, I guess it says to wait for 8 agents to come online. And now comes 2 other options, parallel commands and parallel commands on agents. And if you want to see the description for this, you should go to github.com/narwhal/CI and read the description in this YAML file or the README file in that repo. There will be descriptions, but I'll try to explain it here. So the parallel commands is what will be run on the coordinator. So while it will distribute other workloads to the agents, these are the NX commands that will be run on the coordinator. And it's this special NX workspace lint, which is pretty fast. And it's the format check NX command, which goes and runs prettier to check for formatting issues, and it'll break the build if there's formatting that isn't according to your configuration of prettier. Okay, we're just about up on time, Christian, but this is the final stretch here. Parallel commands on agents. So these are the jobs or the tasks we want to run on these 8 agents down here. It says parallel 3, but since I changed it from 3, I should say 8, because this is also a tweaking parameter for, this is the max amount of lint tasks that can be done on 1 agent, and 8 is, or is it? No. I'm trying to, this is different from when you're running it locally to when you're running in a DTE workflow. So I might not be fully accurate on this. You know what? I think I have it documented in another workflow. Let's not touch the parallel parameter for now. But we see here we have the NX affected commands targeting lint test build. So we're missing one for end-to-end. And this one should have parallel only of 1. Yeah, now yeah, okay, so I'm remembering now. The parallel parameter here controls how many tasks can be run at the same time by one agent. So for the build commands, it's saying you can bundle up 3 build commands and send to one agent, one NX Cloud agent for this DT workflow. Same for test. You can send tests tasks for 3 different projects, send it to one agent. Could also do 2 or 1, but 3 is the max you can send at the same time. But for end-to-end, they usually take longer. So I only want to send 1 at a time, maximum, to one agent. So that's how this works.
So you usually depend on the amount of cores you have on each agent for this to be efficient.
Yes, right. Exactly. And when you're using the default GitHub hosted runners, it only has 2 not too powerful vCPUs. So 3 is actually probably not very good. It should probably only be 2. But then again, it's not only how many can be run in parallel, it's also how many are bundled up. So I could say I want to send up to 4 at the same time, because it'll finish pretty fast, and then it'll have 2 more to do immediately, rather than reporting back and waiting for the coordinator to distribute some more work, because that's also taking a little time. So it's the package size of how many tasks are sent and queued up inside of the agent runner. Yeah, so that's it from a helicopter perspective. I have a repo where it's set up, but it's not much different from this one. So maybe some final questions from you, Christian, and that's about it.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much explains, how you can use the NX tooling to run this on your DevOps pipeline. And it doesn't need to be GitHub Actions, as we talked about. It will be pretty much the same regardless of any popular DevOps workflow provider. And yeah, you can keep tuning this as you want. Usually, I also like to cache the npm packages. That's another big win. You can see you use Yarn. Yarn is typically faster than npm install or npm CI. But I usually also find a way to you can typically get some caching plugin that can cache the npm packages as well, because that usually also is a big win on the initial setup with installing npm packages. So yeah, by the way, how does that work here? So when you run all these in parallel, has that already? I guess the init command will install it on the agents as well, right? So the agents already is pre-configured with the node packages, right?
Yeah, actually, okay, so this is how we would cache Yarn, the Yarn cache between runs on GitHub. And when we use the setup node action, we just specify the cache parameter to Yarn, and we use Yarn install instead of npm install. But inside here of the DTE workflow, the distributed task execution workflow, it's done by these reusable workflows from now on. They are running the Yarn install or npm install or pnpm install based on the log file you have in your workspace.
Yeah.
And caching, yeah, I think they are also caching for you, because that's a big time saver as well. So they have the mechanism for caching between run and running the install command. So it's not something we need to think about. It's not like there's no install step here, because the reusable workflows are doing that for us. They are also setting up node. There's parameters for fine-tuning this, but it should work pretty well out of the box.
Yeah, this definitely works.
If you need something special, you could do it in the init commands. There's also like a post hook after all of this work is done. All the tasks, the cached build outputs and console output is actually collected in this one coordinator, which sorry, there's thunder here. Thunderclap, pretty close. Okay, so when we're watching this in GitHub Actions, we can actually see the output of all the tasks in one terminal output. So we don't have to look through all the different workers. It's collected here in the coordinator, and the coordinator is also pulling all the caches into this one job, so that if we need, say, we need all the test coverage reports that were produced on many different agents, they are pulled into the coordinator, and then we can upload it to some provider, for example, or we can publish the NPM packages, whatever we need. Everything is gathered up in the main job in the end. And then there's a parameter for running posts. I don't remember what it's called, but for running other commands, say, publish to our test coverage service or publish to NPM, whatever we need.
Nice. Thank you very much, Lars. That was very helpful. How can people get to know more about you and what you're doing?
I would say if you're interested in tech and Angular and NX, all of this, I tweet a lot. So find me on Twitter, look for my name, or my Twitter handle is LAYZEEDK, LazyDK. So that if you want to follow my work, go there, go have a look at my GitHub profile. It's the same handle. It's where I'm promoting the different projects I'm working on.
Awesome. All right. Thank you very much. Ciao.
Bye.